There are so many different reasons that companies make acquisitions. And these examples that were brought up, I think, cover the gamut. In some cases, it's a smaller acquisition for talent. You find that there's a company that maybe only has 5 to 10, maybe 20 engineers, but those engineers are really good in an area that you want to grow. And so, talent acquisitions are sometimes the reason.
A talent, rumor has it, he passed on to you.
On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk merger and acquisition effects, AI renders, and professional lighting designs. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 494, The Hallucination Effect. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is the weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matty Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Alex Capecelatro. He's the founder of Josh.AI. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Then we have Mr. Ian Bryant. He's a technical manager at IES Communications. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Always a pleasure.
Thank you both for being here. All right, gentlemen, we are going to kick this off with a story that comes to us from CE Pro. Despite economic doldrums, M&A activity paints a bullish picture for the CI industry. Essentially, they're talking about a couple of the most recent big deals, specifically RTI and AV Pro. Of course, Resideo and Snap One, but also Harman acquired some stuff from Massimo, B&W, Denon, and Marantz all changed hands the last little bit as well. Go read through the article. There's some great stuff, including the Sonance move on Blaze Audio, which we covered a couple episodes ago. But they're really talking about the consolidation that seems to continue to happen within our channel. Alex, I want to start with you on this. How does the merger and acquisition activity affect the market as a whole?
It's a great question. And honestly, there are so many different reasons that companies make acquisitions. And these examples that were brought up, I think, cover the gamut. In some cases, it's a smaller acquisition for talent. You find that there's a company that maybe only has 5 to 10, maybe 20 engineers, but those engineers are really good in an area that you want to grow. And so, talent acquisitions are sometimes the reason. In other cases, you look at the Snap and, ADI stuff, that's more, of a large market, dynamic type acquisition at play. And, everything in between what, Harman's doing and Lutron and whatnot. I kind of scratched my head to think, the article states the premise, this is a sign that the industry is maturing. It's a sign that really things are very strong and the economic situation is good. And I kind of wonder, is that the right picture? Is that what's really going on? And the reason I say this is when you look at a company like Apple or Tesla, they're not making tons of acquisitions. Don't get me wrong. They do acquire companies, but they're investing in their own product development. They're thinking about, where's the next wave of computing or electric vehicles or what have you. And then we look at our industry. And so often companies get started with some innovative idea. They've got some new products, some new mix, and then it kind of slows down. You don't really see that company continuing to innovate. And that's often where acquisitions come in. You look at what Lutron did with Ketra. Lutron maybe could have invented some new lighting, but Ketra was a quicker path for them to have something compelling. And so when I look at what's going on with this, I don't necessarily see this as a maturing industry that is just thriving. I see it as companies are sometimes acquiring others to stay competitive, to offer new features, new products, acquire new talent. And if I'm a dealer seeing all this taking place, I'm thinking, what does this mean for my business? Well, it means a consolidation of products that you can choose. In some cases, companies get acquired and then they go under, or the brands kind of cease to exist. In other cases, you see, when Control4 got acquired by Snap, prior to then this acquisition, the innovation kind of slowed. You stop seeing the level of new product, new throughput coming out, the way that it was beforehand. And so if I'm a dealer, I'm going to be thinking about what brands am I aligning on? What brands am I offering? And if some of those brands have gotten acquired, I'm going to reassess, do I continue to double down on that brand, or do I start to get a little concerned about their quality, their support, the way that they, build relationships with my teams? And in some cases it might get better. You might find that the acquiring company is better about having people in the field to train you, support you, work with you. You might find that they're going to increase the quality. And in other cases, you might say, ooh, that acquirer isn't really the best support team to work with, or they don't really have the highest quality, products. I deal with a lot of RMAs through them. And so I think it's really important to really be aware as a dealer when products get acquired, is the new parent company someone that you want to align with? Or if it's someone that you see red flags, maybe you start to think of, are there other alternative products that you want to lean into?
Yeah, it's a great point. All right, Ian. Before I get directly to you, one of the things that I have noticed in this that I'm intrigued with is we do see a lot of venture capitalism leaving, which is great. Dare I say great? That's interesting to watch. But Ian, the question I had for you was kind of revolving around whether consolidation or competition is better for the integrator. Is the consolidation of the kind of the industry to a degree, does that help the integrator? Because again, everything's kind of under one roof. They can, maybe complete an entire project under one PO from one vendor, or does the competition force some of those vendors to work a little harder for your business?
Of course, you asked me one of the harder questions here, at least.
You're welcome.
Well, we've never been here before. Our industry has never seen this much consolidation in such a short amount of time, and such big vendors coming into company sizes like Harman and Samsung. We've never seen that many people under one umbrella. I think from the perspective of the smaller integrators that may have had trouble getting dealerships or getting set up, this gives them more access. They can get under one company, and then they have opportunities to have a much wider array of products than they normally wouldn't have. But at the same time, our industry was founded by these small, you'd say mom and pop, not just integration companies, but mom and pop manufacturers, people creating products from very small groups that were very unique and niche to solve certain problems. And I feel like we're starting to lose some of that. I mean, I think in some of the areas, like maybe home cinema, we've still got some speaker manufacturers that are very custom and high end, that are very small, and you can work very closely with them, and you get that. But in the grand scheme of things, we've lost most of that, and we're working with now just very, very large businesses. And I hope that we don't go back, in the early to mid 2000s and around the 2010s after the housing market crash. There was a lot of manufacturers that were kind of bullyish, and it was basically, you sign up for us and you sell our products, and you don't sell our competitors' products. And I'm hoping that if these companies get that large, that they don't start that practice again. I don't think they will. We've been through that and matured, hopefully past that. But I mean, I think there's still some exciting things happening, like what Alex was talking about. The AV Pro and RTI thing, I think, was really exciting. It's allowing, again, like he was saying, it's allowing a company to branch into another market that they weren't yet in, which is control, without having to build control from the ground up. But I think that someone like RTI could really use the expertise of AV Pro. And so I think there are benefits that some of these acquisitions will bring. We're really just going to have to wait and see what happens. I think trying to be on the positive side about it, yeah, I think this is going to be good for integrators to have more access to more products. And, hopefully it just doesn't turn into any bullying practices.
I will add, in addition to what Ian's saying, there's, what does this mean for the integrator? What does this mean for the homeowner? But also, what does it mean for the industry? We do see that when companies consolidate, it hurts shows like CEDIA Expo. I think we see the buying groups where they used to have, a larger number of vendor members consolidate, and they don't get, the same multiple of sponsorship. And I do worry about that a little bit. I don't think it's hitting the industry too bad quite yet. But if we think forward the next 5 years, more consolidation means it's going to be hard to have some of these bigger shows with as many events and vendors and sponsors as we do, today, and certainly is what we had a couple of years ago.
Yeah, if you look back, even just 5 years and think what the show floor looked like at Expo, for example, versus what it might look like in September, it's vastly different. And a lot of those big booths just got a little bit bigger, but took out, for lack of that's a terrible term, but added, 6 or 7 and sometimes 10 different booths that all kind of came under the same umbrella. Doesn't happen right away. That's a bit of a slow burn, but it does get there. So that is another aspect to watch. All right, gentlemen, let's change topics for a moment. This comes to us from Residential Tech Today. Let your client's mind run wild with AI. Go read through this article by Rob Scott. Stott. It's a fantastic article talking about the use of generative AI in kind of customer examples, essentially. And he uses the example of a company called Servscape, which is a landscape architect design firm out of the Southeast. And they have a new tool on their website called Instascape, where you upload a photo of your yard and select a couple of styles, and it will show you a variety of essentially landscape designs that you could get in your home. And of course, you follow through, you hire them, all the good things happen. Ian, when you see this, is there a downside to being able to, kind of offer something like this or utilize generative AI like this to show a client what's possible?
You picked two people on this show to be on completely opposite sides of this spectrum on purpose, I swear. Because how much I question AI, and then you have Alex, who's going to be quite the opposite. I have a lot of my own concerns about AI. And I think recently we've been hearing a lot more of what it's potentially the negatives to energy usage and water usage. And that we could go down a rabbit hole on that. That's not what this topic is for. But that's a lot of my concerns are from, and also sharing our information inadvertently, taking a picture of your house, and next thing you know, your picture of your house is out there somewhere. But from an integrator perspective, I think this, yes, could be very useful as long as you're able to train the AI model to produce images for the integrator that are accurate to what they could potentially get. Landscaping is one thing. It's very easy, I think, for an AI model to pull a lot of information around landscaping, but when it comes to technology, there could be a lot of mistakes made, and they still have that hallucination rate. So you got to make sure that it's very accurate, but I think it could be a very promising tool. I mean, we've had those CD has got part on their website, it's like the innovation center where you have examples of projects, really get people's minds going. Of course, if you could take a home cinema design and actually place it into someone's current room with a 30-second processing speed, like time, sure, that would be amazing, especially you show up on a site. I think it's going to take some time to develop the models to know what we need and what we're looking for when it comes to processing. And again, there's just so much more. A shrub is pretty easy for AI to process, but a 98-inch specific model display with these aspects is going to be hard, and they're going to have to work to get it accurate. I think it could be another great tool. And again, one of the things we've talked about when we've had discussions around AI on the show is talking about it as a tool to use in your bag, and how you can, either get more projects or get, your customer more acclimated and understanding about what's going on before they sign off. So I think it could be useful, but I still have my issues with AI. We can have a conversation about that on another one.
A light dose of skepticism. I love it. All right, Alex. Ian does bring up a really good point. Say you're using generative AI to show off that theater room, and you spec a 98-inch, and on the perspective of that image, it looks like 110. You supply the 98, and they're like, well, it should have gone to line up with those things that it, looked like in the picture. What does that client side conversation look like as you go down the vein of, hey, here's what we can do. Here's an example that AI made in 30 seconds. It'll be similar. Is there is that a complicated conversation?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack here. First thing I'll say is definitely on the other side of the spectrum. I am very bullish on AI. Put AI in the name of my company 10 years ago, and the first probably 7 of those years, nobody knew what we were talking about or why we were talking about it. And then all of a sudden it was, hey, it's ChatGPT, but that was, one example, and then Midjourney, and it's kind of, snowballed. My feeling right now is we as humans are so focused on what we can see, touch, and use today that we forget how quickly it's moving. You're talking about, if the TV isn't exactly the right size, how do you have that conversation? That is a legitimate conversation for July or August 2025. That is not going to be a legitimate conversation in 2030. Sometime between 2025 and 2030, those details will get refined. And so I'm really big on remembering this is the worst that AI is ever going to be. And what we looked at 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago was nothing compared to where we are today. In my mind, I know exactly how we'd solve that problem to make sure that we know the dimensions, we know you've got the right, TV, we've got the right specs. But I'm on Ian's side. That's not what you get today. If you ask to render a specific model Samsung TV in a room, you're going to get something not exactly right. There's a hallucination effect that's taking place. To me, that's a reason to be mindful and cautious of using this today. But if we think about where it's going, I'm really bullish because I think this solves one of my biggest complaints about how we as an industry sell to customers. When I talk to friends who say, hey, this is a proposal from an integrator, can you just take a look at it? Let me know if it sounds legitimate. It is a list of line item products with funny names and large dollars, and they don't see the vision. But these tools that we're talking about in this article, this changes the sales dynamic. Instead of selling a product, you're selling a vision. It's a lot harder to say no to seeing a vision of what the experience is going to be like. And I think when we get integrators selling stories, selling vision, selling emotional images and videos that someone can put their, life into, it's no longer a matter of is someone going to spend $8,000 on this black box in the rack, but more, do you want to have this type of experience? And where I see it going is short video vignettes. Like imagine you see people coming into a home with the shades adjusting, the fireplace turning on, and it's their actual home. You've got some music playing and the integrator saying, I can give you this experience in 90 days. This is what it's going to cost. That's a very different way of storytelling and sales pitching than what we're used to doing. So that's where I'm excited, but we're not there yet. And we have to be really honest with ourselves. If you try to do this today, you need a lot of disclaimers. It's not going to be exactly what I'm proposing. And some people can probably get away with that. Most of us should not be trying to sell, a disclaimer, based set of images that are not going to look like the real thing. But give it 12 months, give it 24 months, and I think it's going to be a really strong tool.
I would just follow up. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some of the software manufacturers in our industry starting to work on some AI models with their current backend to provide some sort of a rendering tool that uses AI technology to be more accurate. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in the next year or two at Expo. And that's what's something that could be extremely useful.
Yeah, I will tell you that on our on my other company side, not my Omega side, but my construction company side, we use generative AI all the time in our product proposals, etc. And if it has a proper framework, right? If we can supply the architectural drawings for the room or the space, and then essentially let AI paint it for us, the results are fantastic. And it sells every day over a set of architectural drawings. It is ridiculously effective when you use it properly. We have tried to implement it into our AV business. That business is a little bit different, and we don't always have the same level of detailed drawings, which makes the quote unquote painting by AI not as effective. but we're getting there.
Are you using ChatGPT, or what's your tool for that?
We use a couple different ones. There is we use a little bit of Adobe Firefly. We don't use Chat for drawing, but there are a couple plugins. I'm not exactly off the top of my head. I can't remember which one plugs in directly to SketchUp, but there's one directly into SketchUp. We can export a drawing and then literally have it paint and give it the style we want. So you want to talk about trying to sell a kitchen? You tell it what you want it to look like, or supply, because Firefly is fantastic for this. You can supply a reference image and it will apply that to your architectural drawings. It's fantastic. So there's a couple different ones. We've played with, I believe it's Sora for the video kind of walkthroughs of it. Haven't had marketable success with that yet, but it's really, really close. Like it won't be 2030. It'll be 2028.
It'll probably by the time this is recorded and published.
Yeah, by the time we're done, it'll be great. All right, let's change topics and hit this last story real quick. This comes to us from CE Pro, The Hidden Costs of Free Lighting Design by David Warfel, who's a great guy. Go read through this article. It really talks about the challenge of trying to sell a professional design for something, right? Opposed to just calling up a manufacturer and saying, hey, here's what I'm doing. Can you make this work? Not to rag on the manufacturers, because they do accomplish a fairly functional product when you ask them to help you with that. But there is a difference between that and a full set of design. But David goes through and talks about kind of the difference between a free design, which he attributes to like a permit layout, as far as a regular drawing that the electricians can use, product placement versus professional lighting designs and elite lighting designs, and the differences between those two. Alex, I want to start with you on this. I don't think that there's a problem with free design, whether it's control design, automation design, home theater design, lighting design, like this article talks about. But there is a limit to the complexity and the creativeness that can come from that free design. Is there a sustainable drop-off point of free design?
It's an area that I really struggle with, because for years we've talked about, if you don't charge for your design time, your planning time, we're not going to be treated seriously like the other trades. And, that time is lost revenue if you're not billing for it. And it makes business sense. Like I totally get it. But then you look at, people have tried it. It doesn't often work out. Homeowners feel like they're, already paying for architectural fees. And one of the things that we struggle with by not being an accredited industry is we can get basically taken off a project if a tech savvy builder starts to do more of the technology work, or maybe the architect starts to spec the lighting and shades, and it becomes a very tricky dance. And so my one caution to charging for design, I'm not saying you don't propose it, but if you have a client where it's definitely not working, is you might end up missing the entire business if you push too much on that front. And so I think the main thing is make sure you secure the business one way or another. Then once you're in, the question becomes, do you spend 2 hours for free, 20 hours for free, 200 hours for free? Like, it can easily snowball. And so I think there might be a hybrid model where maybe we start to get dealers to say, hey, as part of contracting with us to do your lighting, shading, AV, et cetera, there's a certain amount of billable hours that are included with the gear. Maybe that's, 2 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, something manageable. And then once we hit that limit, here's the design rate. And we'll give you as much time as you want, but you're going to pay us what that rate is. And there might be a way to kind of build a model like that in. Because I do agree, if you're not paying for the design, it also gives the integrator less incentive to really design the system the proper way. And that's part of why I think we see a lot of systems that the gear is kind of shoved in. It's not, intelligently mapped out the way that you might want to. It takes time to get there. And so I think there might be some hybrid approach where we say, you're buying the gear, we're going to do some amount of, design work included, but to really design this out the way that the system should be, there's going to be back and forth. There are going to be questions. There are going to be requests. We need some way to build that. Otherwise, the dealer's just losing money.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Ian, as one of my favorite programmers, I'm going to take you back a little bit in time. This is the same conversation we've had about programming for years, that obviously you have to charge for it, but when you show a client a large quote with a massive chunk of programming time, they go, what the heck? I thought it configured itself. There's a difference between giving someone a remote with an on-off and a remote that's fully customized to them. Whether, that's something for the house, something for the boardroom, it doesn't matter. This is that same conversation, right? I can do a lighting design and just throw a couple pot lights in the ceiling, or I can give you a full structured design that shows you not only the fixtures, the lumen output, the candle power, center beam that you're going to get on the table. Like, I can get as technical as you want, but again, at some point, somebody has to pay for that. How do you articulate that value in any aspect of the job?
When it comes to programming, usually also it's directly associated with the hardware. So depending on which manufacturer's hardware you put in and which models of hardware you put in, you may get, a different level of a programming quote. So that really changes. I think conversations just have to happen early, as early as possible, which we all know is difficult in our industry, is getting face to face with the customers. I like kind of what Alex had said and what is in this article, as well as if you understand there's some different levels of design or some different levels of programming, you can then decide as a company which level you maybe want to provide for free to get your foot in the door. And then from there, you can say, hey, this is just a very basic system. This is, our entry level, but we would like to talk to you about expanding this and actually talking to you about much more useful features in your home and how to enhance the house and blah, 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 and go through everything. And then do that, that client discovery conversation, and then provide them with a level of system design that is necessary for what they're trying to accomplish. But it's, finding that balance, from a programming perspective, we have these conversations all the time. We generally, from our team, have our quotes already, the numbers are already there, and sales have already done that conversation, but they know what the customer is wanting from when they have their first customer discovery meetings of, are you looking for a full custom solution with custom graphics to match, your other offices, or to be something else? And so that kind of, it comes together, but it's all about having upfront conversations in the beginning. But I think that we've always kind of in this industry have had a way of trying to figure out that way to get your foot in the door first, and then go from there. But I'll also add that what Alex said is again, we've been harping on this. I've been as an instructor, as a CXCD employee for years, for decades now, of you need to be selling your services because, as we know, hardware, the margins just have over the decades have dropped. And what's most important is the expertise that the integrator provides, and that level of that's the product that the integrator should be relying on, is what they can provide from a design perspective, from an install perspective, from programming, and everything that's encompassing that. And so that's why I think find out from what the size of the integration company you are, is find out what you're comfortable providing for free versus what you feel then should be your next phase, and then show that as your upgrade package or the next step.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, gentlemen, we are going to leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Ian, if people want to connect with you, learn more about IES Communications, where can they do that?
Go to iescom.com. That's iescomm.com. You can find me on social media pretty much everywhere at iBryant20 or Ian Bryant.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Mr. Capecelatro, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Josh.AI, where can they do that?
Best thing is head over to the website, Josh.AI, and you can learn everything you want. You can contact us, and always happy to chat.
Excellent. Thank you again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Matt D. Scott on most of the socials. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek,
the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.